the only city in Texas as well. In Houston tonight, there will be more theater tickets for sale than any other city in America outside of New York City. In Dallas, they have 3 cultural arts facilities that have been built in the last 10 years. There's a National Sculpture Gardens. There's an entire cultural arts district. This city, a little government university town, developed a new cultural arts community, if you will, a rather substantial one, a museum of modern art, Long's Center for Performing Arts. In Fort Worth, there's a new museum of modern art. The Bassett's have built one of the finest symphony halls in the world, John. So, and that happened in a decade. So we're very, not only are we very sensitive and knowledgeable about the fact that the cultural arts are going to be one of the great tools to lure people into our state. I will suggest to you one of the reasons that happened is that we let people in the state keep more of what they work for. And they made the right decisions about where to expend that money. In many cases, it was in the cultural arts. And so it's been a really fascinating thing to watch this develop out over the course of the years. And so economic development, obviously, as you know, is one of the most important things that a government does. And they do it in a multitude of ways. But as a matter of fact, I just got back from a trip to Italy, to the Milan area, and talking at an economic development conference, interacting with a substantial number of companies in that mid-European area about relocation and opportunities for us to trade. And so I kind of feel like it's mid-afternoon, actually. So jet lag can work in your favor from time to time. So, I want to just share with you, John, thank you for leading this group. I think it's very important for us to interact with each other. And as I shared with him, one of the things, we are not afraid to snitch a good idea that you have in Colorado and transport it to the state of Texas and put it into place. I mean, that's, as I travel across the country and I talk to governors and I talk to elected officials, I share with them that's one of the things that we need to do is spend time with each other to see, query each other about what works and why does it work in your state. Now, I told him, I said, one of the things we will never be able to compete with. It is as hard as we try and as good as we are in the state of Texas of creating an environment, we'll never have the mountains. We'll never have California's weather along that Monterey Bay. I mean, those are things that are never going to happen here. But there is another environment that we can help create, and that is the business climate. And that's what, taxes and regulatory and legal system. I tell people it's really pretty simple. This is not rocket science. The idea of how you create an environment in your state where the private sector gets to keep more of what they work for. Keep a tax structure in place that is as light upon the job creators as you can, still delivering the services that your people require and demand that you deal with. A regulatory climate that is fair and predictable. I cannot impress enough how important it is to have a regulatory climate that is predictable. So, businessmen and women know how to deal with regulations if they don't change midstream. So the predictability of a regulatory climate, obviously the legal system, having one that is fair, that is balanced, that doesn't allow for oversuing. We passed some of the most sweeping tort reform in the nation in 2003. We came back again, tweaked it later in that decade. And in this last session of the legislature, we passed loser pay, which was a very powerful message to those on both sides of the bar, if you will. The plaintiff side and the defense side that said if you, in fact, are going to, if you've been harmed, then obviously we have a system that allows you to go into place and recoup the damages. But if you're filing a frivolous lawsuit, you might want to give it some thought, because if you lose that, you're going to get to pay the legal cost and the damages as well. So the lawyer fees on the other side. So it's been a very thoughtful process that we put in place. And then obviously creating a skilled workforce who is the University of Dallas, University of Denver over here that I visited with. And that's a great institution. You're doing some wonderful things there. One of our regents at the University of Texas was the same role up there, Alex Cranberg. So you all understand as well the development of that skilled workforce and having that intellect in place so that companies that are deciding where they're going to either expand in your home state or you go over to places like Texas and try to recruit them to come back into your state. And it's so important to have that intellectual capital. And over the course of the last decade, we have obviously Toyota, Caterpillar, big manufacturing facilities have moved into the state of Texas. Facebook and eBay have expanded here. Samsung, one of the largest investments in the country, right here in Austin, Texas. They did not come if they were concerned that there was going to be the skilled workforce to go into those highly technical positions that they were created. Caterpillar down in Victoria, we just opened up their new excavator facility, 1.1 million square feet of facility, state-of-the-art, high-tech jobs. Their engine manufacturing is in Seguin, Texas now, just south of here, right before you get to San Antonio. Those are major manufacturing facilities that have been opened in the state of Texas. And obviously the biotech. And listen, some things are just by the grace of God. John and I were talking about that. You got the mountains. We can't compete with that. But Michael Dell was born in Texas. There's some things that happen and you take advantage of. And I think it's very important for us to identify what those are and to use them in our best interest. So, what I just described to you, I could have cut down to a substantial, smaller amount of words and say that competition works. And competition between the states is very important. When our founding fathers created America, they understood that centralized, one-size-fits-all, coming out of a federal government was not necessarily healthy. It had its role. And they described in that great document called our Constitution what that role was. But they also said over in the 10th Amendment that the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution were saved and relegated to the states to compete against each other. And I think that is the beauty of the fabric of America. I shared with you, I really didn't give much of a tinker's damn about the different Broncos until about 3 years ago. And then you all were wise enough to recruit one of the greatest young men in this country in the form of Von Miller. And I pay attention to the Denver Broncos now. From time to time root for them if they're not playing a Texas team. But it's that competition, whether it's on an athletic field, whether it's in your business, whether it's in the state capitol as your governor and legislature are making decisions about taxes and regulations and legal system and workforce, that is really the power of America. It is why we compete with each other. But I want you to be successful. Some people think I go to California so often because I dislike California and I want them to fail. That's not true. Yes, until they get their act together and they understand that you can't overtax, overregulate, and overlitigate, I'm going to be in California sharing with those businessmen and women that there still is a land of opportunity. My bet is there will be other governors there. Matter of fact, I know there are other governors there too. This man goes and he recruits there and he talks to people about here's why you need to come to Colorado. And as we watch each other, and as we learn from each other, and as I said, I have no problem in the world taking a regulatory course or a taxation course or a legal course of action that will make Texas more competitive. And my instinct is most others got to move that way as well. And then people get to decide what they want to do. And we have been very very successful over the course of the last decade. And it's not just me saying that. Just this last month, Foreign Direct Investment. It's a new publication that ranks all of the states on their foreign direct investment in their states. We received the Governor's Award. That was their highest award for the state that was most successful in luring foreign direct investment into their state. Forbes magazine, Chief Executive Officer, which I actually, of all of the, CNBC chose as the #1 state in the nation to do business. The Forbes, Wall Street Journal all had articles or rankings that had us at the top of the best places to do business. But Chief Executive Officer magazine. This is men and women like yourselves who make decisions every day, who feel the impact of tax, regulatory, legal impact, workforce upon your business. You're the ones who have to make decisions about whether you're going to expand or whether you're going to relocate somewhere else. Because of the environment is better for your business and obviously better either for your stockholders or for your personal investors or your family. Chief Executive Officer Magazine has chosen Texas as the best place to do business for the 8th consecutive year. And John, just FYI, we're working on putting things in place that will give it to us for the 9th consecutive year. We've led the nation in exports for a full decade. We've added more than 220,000 private sector jobs, July of 2011 through July of 2012. 2 solid years of job growth during a time that other states, unfortunately, were shedding jobs. And listen, look, you didn't think you were going to come here and not hear me brag about Texas. We are proud of that. We're proud of building a business climate so that people can take care of their families, so that they know that there truly is an environment that's in this state where they can take care of themselves and their family better than any other place in the country. And it's an important part of our story that we tell. And again, one of the things that I will suggest to you as I wrap up is each state gets to decide what the structure will be that they live in. Again, this is wisdom of people who came well before us. Our legislature only meets for 140 days every other year. Write that one down. We have a constitutional requirement that our budget be balanced. We cannot spend more money than we take in. And we have a rainy day fund that was created, I think, in the late 80s that allows for severance taxes off of natural gas, and with that goes into this rainy day fund. It's approaching, well, I think it's over $8 billion now. So having a rainy day fund, which allows the folks in Wall Street to take a look at the states and give us one of the lowest, give us the highest ranking from a debt standpoint. And those are so important from long-term strategic planning for your state. And Colorado, again, you're blessed with an extraordinary amount of natural gas in that state. And as we are at this particular point in time, probably for the next 20 or 30 years, that shale gas is going to be an important part of it. Now, I'll say that from time to time, I always get a bit of humor. Some of you will remember that I actually led the Republican race for the Republican nomination for president, and back in August and September. And it truly was one of the most exhilarating 3 hours of my life. And in one of the debates, I think it was Mitt actually said, "Well, shoot, man, being governor of Texas, that's like drawing 4 aces a poker game and thinking you're a good poker player. Which is actually a pretty good lie. Wrong, but a pretty good lie. But the point is, people think about Texas. And they may even think of the same about Colorado to some degree, that you have these natural resources. And then everything else just kind of falls into place. In 1984, the amount of the gross state product that the oil and gas industry made up for the state of Texas was approaching 14%. And think about, over the course of those 20 plus years, the industry has exploded. I mean, we have seen so many, particularly in the last 10 years, discoveries that we didn't even know were there. And so, and the price of oil was, in 1984, was probably around $30 a barrel. Today, it's approaching $100. And there's this huge amount of shale gas that's been found. Today, the oil and gas industry in the state of Texas approaches approximately 9% of our gross state product. Now, think about that. That's how much we've diversified our economy. That's the policies that we put into place, tax, regulatory, and legal-wise, that allow people to come here, lure people to come here to be a part of this great, expansive economy. And it happened because people were willing to make tough decisions. It didn't happen because we drew for races. And that, I would suggest to you, is one of the reasons Colorado is going to be a successful state, putting tax, regulatory, and legal system policies in place that allow men and women like yourself to be able to make decisions that are in the best interest of your company and allow your employees to work and be prosperous and to take care of their families. That is the most important thing that a government does. So thank you for coming to Texas, and thank you for bringing ideas that we will appropriate and put into place. John, thank you.
That's a tough act to follow. I will point out that in 1984, as someone who was at that time was an exploration geologist in oil and gas, the price of oil got very briefly to $30 in 1982, and then it collapsed. 1984 was on its way down. 1986 was the year I got laid off. So remember that quite vividly. It's also worth pointing out that, and Texas is, in terms of the continental 48, the largest state. But as I've said many times, if you were to drape a large, very, very large imaginary piece of silk over the entire state of Colorado so that it covered every mountain and went down and filled up every valley, and then you lift it up and spread it out, Colorado is bigger than Texas. So, and we are going to steal every idea we can, and I certainly agree with you in terms of the importance of a predictable, pro-business environment. We have, thank God, we have Ken Lund. You steal almost anything else, all of our ideas, but you can't take Ken Lund, who was ran one of our largest law firms and is now our head of economic development. Really helping us as a state begin to unify our vision of what economic development will look like, and what is that regulatory environment. How do we create a state that's not just known as has some of the greatest ski resorts, the most beautiful landscapes, but also is relentlessly pro-business. Right? We're going to hold ourselves to high environmental standards. We're going to make sure that our businesses are accountable in terms of their ethics and environmental impacts, but we are going to be relentlessly pro-business. And that first 6 months when I got elected, we came in and we went all over the state. We got all 64 counties to each do their own economic development plan, and then we distilled all those plans into regional plans, and then one, what we call that, the bottom-up economic development plan. And it really was, in every corner of the state, it's exactly what people wanted. They wanted less red tape. They wanted to make sure that we had more access to capital. They wanted to make sure that we were doing a better job of training our talent, that we had kids ready for the jobs that were being created, that we were able to cultivate, create a culture of innovation and technology, that we really supported those efforts, and that we were willing to go out and recruit companies. And I probably don't get to California quite as often as Governor Perry, but I bet it's damn close. Yeah, exactly. I think the real key that we look at, and I think we'll continue to recruit companies back and forth, but we spend a lot of time looking at how do you attract entrepreneurs. And I think that a lot of you, we've had the discussions. Jim Clifton was back in Colorado a couple days ago, and that whole notion that we've got a surplus of inventions and ideas sitting on shelves. But one of the things we're really lacking are entrepreneurs, right? At a certain point, you got an idea, you need some talent, you've got to make sure you've got capital, but you need someone who's going to go out there and put it all together and create the enterprise that actually creates jobs. And over the next couple of years, I think there are a lot of things that we're going to be exploring to say, how do we accelerate that process? We had the Colorado Innovation Network Summit, was 2 weeks ago. Muhtar Khan, the chairman and CEO of Coke, came, was a keynote speaker. I know a lot of you guys were there and got to see it. But, I mean, Muhtar Khan, when he left, he says, you guys are doing exactly what this country's got to be doing, right? And really focusing on how do we take that next generation of young entrepreneurs and give them the tools and the environment by which they can create wealth and create jobs that allows our country's progress to continue. So I think that's part of your task. It's Governor Perry says whatever government works on, but it's what every community works on, right? And whether you're one of our business leaders, whether you're working for a nonprofit, one of our universities, we're all in that same effort, right? How do we really vet ourselves to be relentlessly pro-business with the highest standards? So let's have a little discussion. Kelly, you're going to go up and grill us.
You may sit down. Together on the red
I will be to your right.
I didn't know you were going to be quite so far on my right.
It's a small couch, so actually there's not a lot of distance to travel. So I want you all to think of questions you want to ask the governors. I'll start us off with one. As Governor Hickenlooper mentioned, he recently hosted a COIN summit, really focused on innovation, and innovation being, are you guys listening? It's my turn. Innovation being key as we go forward. So the governor gave us all a very large coin, and the point of the coin was, one, if we bring it, he'd buy us a drink, but it's so large, he actually knew none of us would ever carry it with us, so he'd be safe. But the coin is intended to remind us of the most important essence that he was trying to relay. I wonder if each of you could talk about, if you had to very quickly say, the key message you would want every person in the business community to be holding at the forefront as we think about how to drive innovation and success in our states, what that would be and what you would ask us to be doing. Governor Perry?
I think I touched on it in my remarks when we talked about what is the most important thing. If I went around the room and said, what's the most important thing that government does? Because government can either be an impediment, in some states they are. Government, they've taxed too much, they've regulated too much, they've created a legal minefield, they haven't put in place accountable public schools so that the workforce is innovative, or not as innovative, is not as highly trained as it should be. But if I went around the room and I said, what's the most important thing the government does, it'd be a host of answers. And to be correct, you could say public schools, transportation infrastructure, protecting the environment, delivering health care, the list goes on and on. Important things the government does, but I will suggest to you that's not the most important thing. The most important thing that government does is help create an environment where job creators have the confidence that they can risk their capital and have a return on their investment. Because if you do not do that first, officers for public safety are the other important things that you all would list off if you do not first have the environment where job creators know that they're going to have a chance to have a return on investment.
Yeah. What do you think the most important thing that you would say to us as we try to help support this driving of innovation?
So he was just pitching Texas again, just so we're all clear on that. I want to make sure we got that.
That is correct.
So actually, his message is pitch Texas.
So, you know, and I think there's the other side of this, and there's two guys up in Boulder that started a new ad agency, Rob Shimon and Alex McGusky. And at a certain point, part of what I want you guys to be aware of is that as competitive as we are, and I believe deeply in the market economy, but to a certain extent, we also have to recognize that collaboration, and what Alex McGusky said was that collaboration is the new competition. In other words, there are tremendous benefits if you can figure out within that competitive environment ways to bring people together and ways to collaborate. And I think the political system, I mean, you guys have all heard me say that the attack ads and the negative, I mean, again, Coca-Cola would never do attack ads against Pepsi. Pepsi would just counterattack and attack Coca-Cola. You depress sales of Pepsi for a minute, and then all of a sudden you depress sales of Coke, and you'd end up depressing the product category. Right now, I think we're depressing the product category of democracy through all these attack ads, and really harming our ability to collaborate and work together for the long-term, bigger visions of how do we create those investments that guarantee a future for our business community. So I guess that would be the flip side.
So Governor Hickenlooper, collaboration, I got it, and I get a drink, right?
You got it.
So,
you get
just
it.
so I'm clear, I brought my coin all the way from Colorado. No, if you guys can go to the microphones if you want to help me out at all, you know, collaboration, working together. But I want to go a little bit into your backgrounds. Both of you have had, like many of us, interesting jobs in your backgrounds. Governor Perry, you're a door-to-door salesman, I think I saw. And you actually share some experiences that really have been beneficial today. And Governor Hickenlooper often talks to us about what you learned in the brew pub and the restaurant industry. Can you share key lessons from each of those backgrounds that you want the group to know about? Or maybe the one you don't want us to know about? That would be interesting.
Well, and I think a lot of you have heard, I think in any small business, but especially a restaurant, you learn very early on that there's no margin in having enemies, right? That you'll go out of your way, you will, no matter how unreasonable that customer is, you'll do anything it takes to build and maintain that relationship, because otherwise you're going to go out and trash your reputation. By the time you hear about it, it's 2 months later and you can't change it. The other thing that I think the restaurant business allows you is that 100 times a day to measure the relative value of risk versus reward, which is it's kind of fundamental of almost any enterprise. And you're making decisions on whether it's the menu or staffing, you know, when you cut people, how do you set up a different process to do the prep work for a dish on your menu. But always trying to say, all right, if I'm going to invest this much time, this much money in this specific task, what's my return going to be? And what's the risk going to be that if it doesn't work, how much am I going to be out? And I think that the value of risk versus reward is, again, in a small business like that, you get to make so many of those decisions so much more rapidly that you begin to get almost an instinctive sense of that proportion.
The door-to-door Bible sales is probably as good a way that I can think of to prepare you for life. Of being told no over and over again. You're not smart enough. You didn't come from the right family. You don't have the right ethnic background. you didn't go to the right school. And instilling in our young people that they're going to be told no from time to time, if not time after time after time, and continuing to stay focused on, here's my mission. Now that really came in handy for me because I dated my wife for 16 years. And, I asked her to get married a lot of times. And you know, just stay focused on the mission. It's really important, whether you're a young door-to-door book salesman or whether you are a corporate CEO who is trying to implement policies to make your company or your state be more competitive. And you're going to be told, no, that's not the way that we've always done it. That will not work. You're not going to succeed. But if you are passionate in your belief and you are surrounded by men and women who share your vision, then you will be, in most cases, successful.
Thanks. It makes you reflect on all those jobs we've all had and the lessons learned from them. And, you know, the misery of, I was a dishwasher in college. And, you know, my real lesson learned was people throw a lot of food away. But important even today to think about, right, how wasteful we can be, and that there is somebody cleaning up on the other side of all of our decisions that we engage in. A lot has come up today about collaboration and competition, and certainly I'd say our business community in Colorado is very competitive. We're very polite about it, but we're very competitive. Could each of you share, you know, competition comes in many forms against an opponent, but also competition about ourselves and our personal goals and things we want to achieve. Could each of you share something that you achieved, but you said, I can do that better, I want to do it better, I'm going to strive for more, what that was or what you're working on now?
I can think of something just here in the recent past. I don't want to make any news today.
That horse might be out of the water.
Nothing that you really want to share with 150 people from Denver?
You know, the list, I think they say it's a record as long as my arm. You know, I think that the challenge always is to, just like any business is always like lean programs, you're always trying to make the business more effective, more efficient. Most of us as individuals have that desire to continuously improve ourselves, and sometimes the hard thing is to call yourself on your own nonsense, right? The stuff that you tell yourself, that you push yourself to believe in. I think that's one of the reasons why so many people still play sports, right? I mean, I still play squash, try to play at least 2 or 3 times a week. It's amazing to watch someone who's at the height of their game. The President Obama is relentlessly competitive when he's on a basketball court. You know, the stories that you hear of him playing, and if people don't play their hardest against him, they don't get invited back to play basketball again. It's like this whole little saga. And I think that sometimes those sports, whatever your game is, whatever your form of competition is, it allows you to hold yourself, continually try to lift yourself, make yourself better.
I think, in all seriousness, the message here is don't be afraid to take a chance. You think about all of the things that have been done in the world, whether it was Christopher Columbus, who set sail to running for the presidency of the United States. Don't be afraid to take a chance. If you believe if your vision is sound, if you believe in where you want to go, the result, don't be afraid. You're going to fail. I think Winston Churchill said that success is not final and failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue on that really counts. And I think whether you're in our business or whether you're trying to start a new venture, understanding that if you have the courage to go forward, then you are going to be a success, even in failure, because that heap of biotech companies that went forward that did not succeed, but they helped build a foundation for the companies today that are manufacturing vaccines that are going to keep our loved ones alive or stop a pandemic somewhere in the world. That, I think, is the lesson for all of us, is to do not be afraid to take the chance to change the world.
And we have a question from Bob Diebel.
Governor Perry, economic development. In Colorado, or at least in the Metro Denver region, or really the Front Range, as we call it, from Colorado Springs to Fort Collins, where most of this, or the largest majority of the state's population is, there's an economic development brain, and we work hard on the clarity of that message. And it has to be a compelling story because it often doesn't include significant upfront hard dollar economic incentives. Yesterday we learned a lot about the Austin brand, and which is also a compelling story. What I thought was interesting was looking at all the statistics that the demographer shared with us. Many of the statistics relating to economic development indicators not only showed Austin favorably ranked, but I noticed how many of those same slides, very close to that ranking was also Dallas and Houston, and in many cases even San Antonio, which really got me thinking about the state brand, knowing that Austin was like 7% or something of the state's population. I wonder if you can just kind of summarize the structure of the funding sources, not so much tax policy, but the sources of funds for what I at least perceive to be a large kind of economic incentive reservoir, war chest, just in terms of structure.
Yes, sir, thank you. You said a magic word earlier in your remarks. You said enterprise. And in 2000, I'll be very quick with this story. In 2001, I'd been governor for maybe 6 months. We got a call that Boeing was going to move their corporate headquarters out of the Pacific Northwest, and they boiled it down to between Dallas-Fort Worth and Chicago. We got all excited, went forward, went up and worked with the Dallas-Fort Worth area chambers, and what we discovered was that we were not very good at economic development. We did not have many tools in our toolbox, if you will, to go be competitive with, in this case, Chicago. Long story short, they chose Chicago. And we came back in 2002 in preparation for the 2003 legislative session and said, what do we need to do? We created the Enterprise Fund, which at that time, I want to say it was about a $200 million fund that we put together. It's a deal closing fund. It has a matrix of if you bring this many jobs into the study, we will help you in these areas with a straight out grant in case of the Enterprise Fund. Has clawback provisions, contract. I mean, it's just basically a contract to be competitive. And it's worked very well. I think we are approaching $450 million that we have outlaid over the course of the last almost 8 years now. And some $26+ billion of capital that can be directly attributable to that fund. And I can't remember off the top of my head the third thing. There's a whole bunch of jobs, though. My point is that this is truly a very, it's a competitive business. And again, there are other states that have looked at that and put those in place. About 2 years later, and actually 4 years later, I think in 2007, we created the Emerging Technology Fund. Now this one's set up a little bit different. You talked about that gap funding and that's exactly what it's there for, where angel investors or VC types that are prolific in California and some of the other states. You all have a number of individuals and companies like that in Denver. But we saw that was very important, from innovation to commercialization, and that there was that gap in there where, the angel and the VC types were we're not sure. It was a great place for the state to play. And we've been very successful, and we invest in these companies. This is a straight-out investment that we make in these companies. I mean, we're basically we compete with the VC in this sense, but it's generally if they will go to the private sector, if it's there. If the private sector is not available, the Emerging Technology Fund comes into place, and we have a substantially more in that portfolio now that we've invested in. So it's been a good investment for the state, and it has allowed for Texas to become very, very well known internationally. We've recruited scientists from as far away as Sweden, from Italy, who have come into Texas at our universities, and they, in some public-private partnerships and partnership with the state, have created a really dynamic environment in this state to create innovation that is then commercialized. So, John, I mean, I think that's one of the things that some other states have come and looked at. Even California brought a contingent. Their Lieutenant Governor, Gavin, brought some folks over and looked at what we were doing. And these two programs are two of the most interesting that other states look at, because we have been so successful in luring companies like Capital, like Facebook and eBay, to the state of Texas using the Enterprise Fund and then the Emerging Technology Fund for these university expansions.
But I think it's worth also pointing out, it's funny, and you were just been elected governor, but there was a third city when Boeing was looking to move. So it was Dallas, Fort Worth, it was Denver, Colorado, and it was Chicago. And on this same trip to Seattle, 2 years later, I'd just been elected mayor, and I had the blind fortune to meet with the executive vice president of Boeing. And I asked him, because in the end, we offered, I think, $38 million in incentives over 20 years. You guys all, I think you have $48 million in incentives over those years. And Chicago offered $70 million. And so I said to the guy, why'd you put us through this? You knew we couldn't compete with Chicago or Dallas for those kinds of incentives. And the guy looked at me and he laughed in my face. He said, are you kidding me? Over 20 years, you thought the difference of $30 million? We're a $58 billion a year company. That's a rounding error in our weekly profit and loss statement, right? That was the ante. When we went to Dallas, they had a great reception for us, and Troy came, and we went to Denver, and John Elway showed up, and you guys had nice receptions. When we went to Chicago, they had a reception with 200 CEOs from every different type of business, all major nonprofits. Every one of them, there were 30 people on the Boeing selection committee. Every one of those 200 executives from Chicago had one of the Boeing executives that they had to talk to, and they had to convince that executive that Chicago was going to make Boeing the most successful aviation company on earth. And then they spent 3 hours in that meeting, and so every one of the Boeing executives had at least 5 people came up to them and gave them a different perspective on how Chicago was going to make them succeed. And then once they got that done, and they picked Chicago, the governor there, or the Mayor Daley, set up in the lobby. We've done this a couple of times in Denver, but set up a lobby. So they did their 5-story renovation, and they had it done in 4.5 months. They had the plan reviewers and the building inspectors working out of desks in the lobby of the skyscraper, so there could not be a single holdup, and make sure that they got into business in time. And then once they opened, the governor set up a place for the first 3 weeks that Boeing moved to Chicago, a table in the lobby so people get their Illinois driver's licenses and register their cars without leaving their office building. And I think that's, as much as incentives matter, it's also the business mentality. I mean, Texas, the other thing I love about Texas, and we're going to work on this, but you come to Texas and people love, if you talk to people who grew up in Texas, they love Texas in a way that you almost don't see in any other state. Part of that is Texas teaches Texas history in 10 years. At a K-12, out of your 13 years of school, in 10 of those years, kids are learning the lessons of geography or economics or anything. They're learning it from a Texas perspective, kind of force-feed them their heritage, right? Their legacy, which is, I'm holding it up as a positive thing. People are always happier if they love where they are. They're going to work harder, they're going to be more enthusiastic about their day.
And as Paul Harvey said, the rest of that story is that Illinois, about 2 years ago, raised the personal income tax rate by almost 50% on those Boeing folks that moved there. And let me, Kelly, share this last little bit of that story. A year and a half ago, I had the opportunity to go support our young men and women in the military on the USS Reagan. As I was watching an onboard delivery aircraft land and a group of distinguished visitors got off of that aircraft, I noticed one of the people and recognized him as Phil Condit, the former Chief Executive Officer Chairman of the Boeing board as we were going through that process almost a decade ago. And I caught up with him in the hangar bay a little later, and I just introduced myself to him, and we visited a little bit, and I was sharing with him a little of the story of the work we had done to try to get Boeing, and he kind of got a little humor of some of the things I told him about that we were trying to do. And I said, Mr. Connick, where are you living now? Frisco, Texas. He came to a place to retire where he could keep more of what he works for. So that I would suggest to you is an ongoing story of this competition between the states. And if Boeing, I would venture a guess, a decade later, if Boeing had the opportunity, they might not admit it publicly, but they would like to be in the state of Texas.